Start recording. Give it a couple of seconds there, share Orton, and then when you're ready.
All right, I'm calling to order the February 24, 2025 special meeting of the Library Commission. This is a hybrid meeting with commissioners, city staff, and members of the public participating in person. And I think we're at the Arriaga Recreation Center, or you are, right? In accordance with public health guidelines for in-person meetings and the public participating remotely. 6:31 right now. We'll start with a roll call. As you can see, using provisions from the Brown Act, I'm participating virtually. And the other commissioners present include, I see on the screen, Kim Crockett, Michael Herrick, David Pollock, Scott Schaefer, and Brian Westcott. And staff present include Library and Community Services Director Sean Reinhart and Assistant Library and Community Services Director Nick Shegda. Nick will be helping facilitate the meeting. Nick, will you please take a moment and provide instructions to the commission and members of the public in attendance on how the meeting will proceed?
Thank you, Chair Orton. For members of the public who are attending this meeting virtually and wish to provide public comment, after the chair calls for public comment on the item you wish to speak on, please engage the raised hand feature at the bottom of your Zoom screen. For those who are calling in from a landline or cell phone, please press *9 to raise your virtual hand. Members of the public attending remotely who wish to speak, please take a moment to make sure your first and last name are updated on Zoom, or you may provide your name and spelling as you are called to speak. Public comment will be heard in the order received and is limited to 3 meetings in length. For members of the public in person, there are speaker cards here on the table to my left. Please complete one and turn it in to me before public comment is called for the item you wish to speak on. If there are a large number of public commenters, the time limit may be adjusted by the chair in order to allow everyone a chance to comment. When your turn for online public comment is arrived, I will unmute you. And with that, I will turn the meeting back to the chair.
Thank you. We'll start with regular business. Under regular business, the Library Commission considers recommendations from city staff on policy matters or administrative actions that require Library Commission approval. And the first matter under regular business is C1, which is approving the minutes from the January 27, 2025 meeting. Nick, do we have any public comment on this item?
Is there any public comment on item C1, approving the minutes from the January 27th, 2025 meeting? Seeing none.
Would anybody like to make any comments, or is there any discussion on the minutes from the January 27th meeting? No, hearing none. Would a commissioner like to make a motion to approve?
I'm sorry, Chair Orton, there's a couple of hands raised here in the room. Commissioner Herrick had a comment, I think, and then Commissioner Crockett had a comment.
Okay.
I think my comment is simply on the vote of the chair passing over in September. I think they'll probably have further discussion on that. I think it's fine to approve the minutes this way. I just wanted to make that note that there's a little offline discussion, and maybe it'll be a different date, so that we can bring that up later in the meeting.
Okay, thank you. And Commissioner Crockett.
I just had a question on the statistics that were presented by staff from last time, because when I was looking back on it, I just wondered, we've got like different FTE numbers for the library in the staff report for the Star Library presentation. It said there were 25, which were not the 25, right? They were at 11 this year.
I think I can speak to that. When we do that sort of statistical roll up for the state library reporting, they ask us for full-time and full-time equivalents. So we basically take all of our part-time staff, the hours of all of our part-time staff, and smoosh those together. So 11 full-time staff, 13, 14 part-time staff, combined into full-time equivalents. It's actually many more than 13 or 14. There's probably 25, 30 part-time staff at the library. But the hours they work smoosh up together into 13 for reporting up to the state.
Okay, all right, that makes sense. I just wanted to clarify that and also the budget for the library. Like, is there a 2025, 24, 25 budget for the library?
Yes.
Because I can see the library community services budget overall and the expenses that the library incurred perhaps in 23, 24. But I couldn't find an official budget number.
You know, we could perhaps add that to a future meeting to walk through the city's budget is online, and it's like a dynamic system.
Yeah,
And there's
about that.
sort of like a different ways you can kind of click through and see specific divisions like the library, so we can demonstrate that at a future meeting.
Okay, it's just that it was 3.5 or 3.7, something like that.
Yeah,
No,
that sounds
sounds
about
And
right.
that,
Yeah,
that is,
Yeah, that's
so somewhere in there.
It's just splitting it when you're looking at the, OpenGov portal or the, budget portal through the city website. It helps to know which account numbers are the library so that you can break it out that way. And it's not super clear for somebody who's not steeped in city budgeting to like say, this part's the library, this part is seniors, this part is athletics, things like that. So I
right,
could show you that, or we could bring it back.
We should do it we'll do it in the commission, and we'll show you like kind of the navigation, and once you see it, it's pretty clear.
okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I think that's it for questions in the room, Chair Orton.
Okay, thank you for that. Would a commissioner like to make a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
And would
Brian
anybody like to
Westcott.
make? Okay, thank you, Commissioner Westcott.
So we have a motion to approve the minutes from Commissioner Westcott, seconded by Commissioner Pollock. I'll go ahead and do a roll call vote. Commissioner Crockett, how do you vote?
Yes.
Commissioner Herrick, how do you vote?
Yeah,
Commissioner Pollock, how do you vote?
Yes.
Commissioner Schaefer, how do you vote?
Yes.
Commissioner Westcott, how do you vote?
Yes.
And Chair Horton, how do you vote?
Yes,
The motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
thank you. The next item is C2, a report out from the ad hoc subcommittee consisting of Commissioners Crockett, Herrick, and Westcott. After the report out, we'll take public comment and then bring it back to the commission for discussion.
Okay, a brief summary of what the ad hoc committee has been up to. We continue to go to our library visits to benchmark different libraries, mostly in the Bay Area. To see how Menlo Park will compare to these other libraries. I think last week was Burlingame.
Yes, so we went to Half Moon Bay and also Burlingame in the last week or so.
And we're almost finished with that.
Wednesday this week is Palo Alto, and so we'll have a small group going to that.
Yeah.
Okay. And we continue on our schedule. One of the things we're looking at, we've started a draft survey to look at specifically library of the future issues. It's meant to be a short survey where people can fill it out and give us, it's more of what we're calling an exploratory survey to get the impressions of the citizens. And then there's an ongoing literature review and with the goal of getting to a report later this summer so we're pulling all this information together in the next few months.
And I'll add that Scott and I in the literature review are aiming, I can't remember if it's March or April, but we're certainly getting back together in a couple of weeks, and we're gonna hone in on a couple of just sort of concepts and provide definition. I think I saw on the agenda for March that there is discussion of outreach. And I think, two of the things that we're focusing on are community engagement, and then I believe Scott is looking at, equity and access and just what those mean in the library context. So we wanted to give people a heads up about that, and if we're able to pull something together by the March meeting as part of the ad hoc committee report, it might go very well with, I think, the library staff talking about outreach, efforts in the community. So we'll aim for that if we can. I don't- Close to the fire.
And I'll also add that with these library visits, Commissioner Orton and I went to the Half Bay and Burlingame ones. We're focused on interviewing the librarians, library staff about what works, what doesn't, what they see their challenges are. And it's been really truly informative, and we've been documenting that with memos. A lot of information, so hopefully that will be helpful to us as we try to assess our needs going forward.
Great. Any
think
other,
that's-
yeah, before we get public comment, or are you ready, Nick, to ask for public comment?
I think we're ready.
Right.
If this time, if you have public comment on item C2, the ad hoc subcommittee update, please raise your hand. And seeing no comment.
Oh, sorry, one addition on, I think it was on the agenda. Because I believe it was called a future library, a draft exploratory survey on the future library, when really it's library of the future,
Library of
so it's a
the
little bit of a different connotation.
Right.
So I just wanted to catch that,
Got you.
I
I think I may have just copied what Commissioner Westcott had sent me in an email, so I understand that
yeah.
could cause some
but-
confusion.
but
Yeah, I
That's
apologize for
an
that.
easy thing, but.
It should be library of the future, not the future library. Got you. I will make sure that gets in the minutes. Apologize for that.
Oh, no,
That could-
no.
Spicy.
It's
than I wanted it to
different,
be.
yeah.
It's very different.
It's different, yeah.
So had you gotten to the point, Nick, of asking for public comment?
There is no public comment on this item.
All right, and so I think we should open it up to any comments or questions from commission members to the ad hoc subcommittee.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So I'm personally not thrilled about either, definitely not the future library, but also the library of the future connotates some sort of, like, is it a physical entity? Is it a virtual entity? And there's some maybe misunderstanding that what we're talking about is centered on the physical definition of a library. I personally prefer, just even saying future of the library, or at least being sensitive to that we're not necessarily focused on the physical attributes of a library in the future, but more on the services and how it engages in the community. So I just wanted, that's not a question, it's more of a statement of interest or concern for the subcommittee as it explores. My one question is, how is interested commissioner find out the schedule of library visits so that one can say, like I did at the end of last commission meeting, oh, I really want to go to library visits in San Mateo County. And if Burlingame's coming up, that would be great. I'm sorry that I'm South San Francisco is happening like the next day. If I knew maybe a little earlier, I could have, made different arrangements. Half Moon Bay was visited, Palo Alto shortly. I really, if I'm available, I would love to be able to participate in, some of these meetings. Is there a process that I should have been aware of, but missed, the communications, or, if there are any upcoming meetings, how can I make sure that I can check my schedule and see if I'm available?
Commissioner Westcott, I'd like to address the first comments by David. So the Library of the Future has always been defined as where the library should go. It has not referred to the physical, because we're not sure there needs to be a new physical, or it could be rehabilitating the present system, but it's more, the Library of the Future is focused on the functions that a library needs to serve the community in the present day, and projecting out, some number of years.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Okay, and so,
And I can add to that, I think, well, first of all, of scheduled visits yet to come, Palo Alto is this Wednesday at 11 a.m. and I believe we do have space because we're trying to keep it to 5. But, David, I'm arranging that. I'm originally, Commissioner Westcott was going to, and then it got changed. But I think the process was laid out at the December meeting in that handout that we had and agendized and had leads for each of the visits. So, certainly, we're sorry if there are any visits you did not make and.
Yeah,
not
so
aware of it. Yeah, it's, I think, been, I don't wanna call it a haphazard effort, because I think it's been very well organized in a certain sense, but I think communication from month to month, is difficult. But if you would like to try to squeeze in the Palo Alto visit, and we may well end up going on a independent tour at some point in the Mitchell Park Library, simply because the director is gonna meet us at 11 a.m. on Wednesday, because she's available at the Rinconada branch. So it'll actually be the Rinconada branch at 11 a.m. But if you'd like to go, do shoot me an email in the coming day or so I can confirm the final group going. And I would just say that in terms of to echo Commissioner Westcott's comments, that I think because there have been we started with all these library visits, there's sort of this assumption that like, oh, we're looking at library buildings, because certainly that's been this first phase. But I think as we get into the discussion of the survey tools that both the city is planning to do for the department generally, and the draft survey tool for this Library of Future concept itself. And also we've been discussing focus groups, which I think we could maybe get into as well if there's time this evening. And if we are able to run some focus groups and do a survey as part of this process, I think that Commissioner Pollack is exactly where it really comes away from the library building itself. And so I think there has been a heavy emphasis on physical structures, simply because there have been visits to physical structures largely in order, I think, to also engage these library directors in the Bay Area.
Okay, and, just to add, I don't mean to be, difficult about it, but so I recall a list going around, who was in charge of which, library visit. I then sent an email, addressed to the person who was in charge of the Burlingame, visit as per instructions. I also mentioned at the end of last meeting, yeah, I'm really interested in Burlingame especially. And so I'm bummed. Maybe we can meet for coffee one day to just chat about what you saw. And not that I need to be part of the meeting, to put my stake in the ground, but just, I'm really just fascinated what Burlingame is up to. So maybe we can meet for coffee offline someday.
On that point, I think Commissioner Orton, I don't know if people realize that she has gone on most of these visits. She will not be able to join the final Palo Alto Library visit, and she's, I have not, I think Nick has printed out a lot of these memos, but she has, provided sort of a common thread, I think, for these visits. It's sort of just a baseline, which we may want to agendize at some point, in which we as an entire commission sort of read this packet of things and have a discussion of all the library visits in total. So there's coffee, but there's also the possibility that in March or April, we may want to have as part of the ad hoc committee sort of report out a specific discussion of the reports of all the library visits. I have to say Commissioner Orton has done the lion's share of the work and sort of document.
Yeah, because like more than like the written report, and I'm not as much of a written report reader for looking for all the details, but I enjoy hearing sort of more the nuance and observations. So as if this it being shared as a agendized discussion activity before focusing on, you know, someone going to a room somewhere and writing up reports. Maybe it'd be nice to discuss some of the nuance discovered in some of these meetings that we can just kind of spitball about before you go off and write the report. Just spitballing.
Yeah, if I could comment, I have gone on, I think all of the library visits so far, and I'm not able to go on the Palo Alto one, but I have personally visited the Mitchell Park Library. And I have written up all but the Half Moon Bay. And Kim Westcott has, or Kim Crockett, sorry, has also written a few of the memos about the library. But I do think that at some point, I don't know that all those reports should be attached to an agenda, because they're really just ways to remind ourselves of what we saw. But I love the idea of getting, you know, I want to do it in a way that is compliant with the rules about the circumstances in which commissioners meet and talk, but to have it part of a future ad hoc subcommittee or, you know, wrap up meeting where we could each talk about our impressions and the, you know, like highlights of things that we learned and programs that were run. And because this is, as Kim said, it's Commissioner Crockett said, it's not all about the building. It's we're learning a lot about staffing and about programs and about things they didn't anticipate that they wish they had, that and things that we don't do because we don't have the resources or you know, whatever. Every library's got their own history. So I think that would be a very useful discussion, maybe next month or the month after, and certainly before we have any, you know, report that's drawn up. And I apologize on the Half Moon Bay one. It got rescheduled at the last minute because of my illness. And I was given one time with a 1-day notice from the librarian of when she was available. And so Kim and I just jumped on it and went over there. So for that one, I didn't really give anybody any notice.
I'm not annoyed at anyone. It's a very cool process, and just the one visit that I participated in, just the energy in the room and the enthusiasm from librarians, just like it just creates all kinds of ideas and opportunities for us to explore. So I look
Absolutely.
forward to that discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. 100% agree with that. All right. Any other comments, questions, follow up on this? I have a question, and maybe it ties into the staff report we'll be getting next, but you mentioned there's going to be a draft kind of exploratory survey, and at what point will the rest of the commission see what the questions are that you're putting together?
We can do it next meeting, or sure, we'll include it for next meeting's package.
Oh, okay. 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 Anything else before we move on to the next item on the agenda? Um, so I'm going to ask for public comment on each of these separately rather than all together, but we're starting on agenda item D1 with an overview of survey tools and methods that are used by the city of Menlo Park. Nick, do we have any public comment on this item?
If you'd like to make a comment on item D1, the overview of survey tools and methods used by the city of Menlo Park, please indicate so now. Seeing no comment, back to you, Chair.
And so now I'm going to hand it back to you to give us the introduction and your presentation on this item.
Not a whole lot of presentation there. I think the report kind of speaks for itself. Some of the discussion at the last meeting was about how the city conducts surveys, what tools were used, how we do it. So just sort of providing some information for the commissioners and for the ad hoc subcommittee on how we've done the last few surveys. The library specific one there was a smaller one because we were targeting specifically users of the Belhaven, old Belhaven branch library and Belhaven neighborhood residents. So it wasn't as widespread as like the aquatics user survey or the larger survey, the library and community services survey, which came out in 2022, 2023, that we did right before, while we were planning for the opening of the Belhaven Community Campus. So we really wanted to get as broad a reach as we could on that one. The most recent survey that we've done was the childcare users survey, and survey of childcare users and childcare needs. And that one was a citywide one, I believe. It went out in our newsletter. And I sort of talk about in the report what kind of methods we use for different kinds of surveys. That's my quick introduction / presentation on that item.
All right, well,
I think we covered these later.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, we're getting some sort of
Noise.
Sounds fun, but I know there's like a protocol or something.
festive folk music. I think that is the Balkan dance class, actually, over there. And sometimes during Parks and Rec Commission meetings, they spill out into the hallway. So it gets very festive, but it is a bit distracting here in the room. So sorry for
okay.
that.
I have to say, I was wondering what was going on at the meeting. So are there questions from commission members for staff on this report? Commissioner Westcott.
No, it was
Okay.
Oh, Crockett. I'm sorry. I got him.
okay.
Yeah.
That's the perils of not being in the room, Carol.
I know that's the problem. I see Brian is going like this and I thought his hand was up. All right.
I'm just wondering if there ever has been a citywide library survey.
Yeah, the last one we did was the Belhaven Space Needs Study, which would have been around 2019.
But that was Belhaven.
Yes, then prior to that, I'm pretty sure there was a survey for when there was discussion about rebuilding the main library as well. That would have been 2017 or 2016, somewhere around there.
Yes, I believe so. A citywide survey, specifically library focused. I think we threw into the report the sort of citywide satisfaction surveys with Godby that were conducted by an outside polling firm. And they would ask library specific questions, but they were fairly general questions.
But it was inclusive
It was the whole city, yeah, I
of
think,
city services.
right, exactly.
Right, so
It was
there-
not library exclusive, that's correct.
Okay.
Mr. Lister. Could you explain the process for actually like administering the delivery of a survey and collecting the information? And who would do that within the city?
Sure, so like who actually does it? It's created by the staff. Often we will take survey questions to the advisory bodies when the survey is still in draft form, so that the library commission and or the Parks and Rec commission can weigh in on the questions before we formalize it and send it out. We have opt-in lists from recreation users, from users of the city website, from topic-based subscribers to the city website, where you can pick what you're interested in finding out about from the city as a user, and then we assume that you're opted in to get information and questions from us at that point. So we'll use those. And then we have a lot of other, is this answering your question?
Yeah, just in general.
So I'm not rattling on and I'm not answering your question. We will usually make physical copies and have them available in different facilities so that people can take a survey on paper if they want to take a survey on paper. A lot of times we will have QR codes with links to the online survey on posters or the monitor screens in the different facilities, so people, if they see it pop up, they can just click it on their phone. We'll usually do the same thing. Well, usually if we send out our LCS newsletter, which you've started getting statistics about, we'll just have a direct link in those newsletters that we send out to the survey, and a little write-up that says, hey, take the survey. We're interested in hearing what you think about childcare, what you think about products, things like that. And then when they come back in, usually they come, well, it depends on what we used, like the smaller survey, the Bellhaven book survey that Rose and Rose's team did most recently. We didn't use public input. I think we used something else. I think it was open forms or something. It was more of a simple thing that kind of spits results out in like tab deleted form, which you can then dump to Excel.
And you have used SurveyMonkey, but not.
We have in the past. The city had in the past a SurveyMonkey account, an official SurveyMonkey account, because you can slice and dice things on the SurveyMonkey back end a lot better than you can do on open forms. We use open forms for really short surveys and or things like our feedback form, like when we have a feedback link, tell us what you think about the library or the facility. It usually goes to an open form, and it's just, like I said, very sort of basic options for slicing and dicing on the back end. SurveyMonkey has a lot more options for sort of cross-tab analysis and things. Public input has some, I understand, but I would look to Sean, because I'm not usually slicing and dicing on the back end when we get the results.
Yeah, public input is on the same order as SurveyMonkey. SurveyMonkey has more bells and whistles, but kind of the same scale.
Yeah, and when we get those paper surveys, what we'll do is just usually hand type them back into whatever tool we're using on the back end, because we don't really have a good other way of getting that. We get a fair number of handwritten survey results from our Spanish-speaking citizens or users, and some of our users of the childcare facilities like to fill out surveys by hand. We've found out. So.
And then you mentioned the access to the data. We envision having both kind of numerical questions and open-ended.
Yes, and those options exist. So you can have sort of like a list of radio buttons, or give me a 1 to 10 rating, and also open text. Usually it's limited in number of characters, but you can usually get a good, if you click through to look at the aquatics user survey, for instance, or the childcare user survey, you get some really interesting responses in the free text box, where we just sort of throw up and say, tell us what you think, tell us anything else
Right.
you want to ask
Yeah.
us about the library. You can get some really interesting information because that allows people to write in about things that we may not have asked them about or may not have thought to ask them about. I think that's a real positive there.
One other point you brought up, should we have a Spanish version and an English version?
I think so.
Yes,
And I think it's
okay.
relatively easy to do so on the popular survey tools. For postcards and marketing things, we will have somebody actually translate it rather than having a machine translation, because there can be some subtleties that make things really wonky if you're not a native speaker with some of the machine. They're getting better, but some of them are still really not quite as
Yeah.
far as.
And we could get it proofread, the Spanish, even if it's machine first round.
Yeah, I mean, Google Translate does it, so you can, if you have it on a website, you can basically set it up so that Google Translate will translate whatever English text is there into Spanish for you.
Yeah, and you still need to get it checked.
Right.
I would say, yeah, if you're going to do that, I would strongly suggest that have it.
Yeah.
Through it by someone who is more of a native speaker.
Okay,
So I have a question, or, so I'm trying to understand, are we focused on the plan subcommittee survey, or is this related? I'm no pressure or no hurry, but at the joint meeting with the Parks and Recs Commission, you mentioned that in the spring you would be sending out an annual survey on community interests that you haven't done since COVID. Is that related to this, or we are talking just in general about surveys? I was just trying to get perspective on the topic we're discussing tonight.
So this topic is, there was some interest in what kind of survey tools do the city use as examples, and so or shared some examples. This city is planning to do another recreation and community program survey, which we did last in 2022, in the run up to opening the new Bellevue Community Campus. We really intended for that to be an annual survey, and just kind of didn't get done while we were focused on opening the building. So we're bringing that back. I think tentatively we have a draft of that survey coming back to both of the commissions, the Library Commission, the Parks and Recreation Commission in March, with the intent for the survey to be finalized then with the commission's minutes and issued in April, and then bring back the results in May, which would be the joint meeting. But I think the conversation was about the ad hoc subcommittee exploring different tools that could potentially be used for the survey that subcommittee is contemplating, if the desire to do something separate from the big survey that the city is doing.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead, I was like.
Well, my question is whether any of the survey tools and survey distribution methods that are outlined in your memorandum are available or usable by the ad hoc subcommittee for this short exploratory survey that they are planning.
Staff's recommendation would be if there are survey questions you're interested in, then mention those when we do the draft survey. The city would not necessarily do like a separate survey just for the subcommittee, absent direction from the city council or city manager to do that.
Yeah, and that was my question as well. Carol said it gets quite clear in the memo that I think we as the Library Commission this year sort of received a charge from the city council, it seemed to me, in the fall to go forward with this thing. So it'd be appropriate for us to have to go back to the city council probably to direct the city manager, because my understanding hearing from Sean and in general, the city manager is not going to authorize library and community services staff to do a separate survey. And I personally think that a recreation and community programs survey is entirely inappropriate to a Library of the Future campaign, because a library is not merely a community program in American democracy. And I think there is a risk in this community of that sort of disappearing into the blend of recreation programs. So I feel very strongly that if we are going to do a survey, it doesn't have to be immediate, but it would need to be separate from a few extra questions on recreation and community programs, sort of annual survey. So I don't know that we have to absolutely do a survey, but it needs to be as broad as possible, probably in the Menlo Park community. And so I think we should explore what our options are to your question, Carol. You know.
Well, I just
whether
took just as a practical matter, just trying to brainstorm ideas and how to everybody get what they want. What I'm wondering is, for example, Sean, every week there's a email that goes out to people who signed up for news about the library. And one of the methods described in the memo is that there would be a link to a survey. It's like ad hoc subcommittee of the library commission is looking for people's feedback about our library. If you're interested in participating, click on this link. So, and then that would take them to this survey that they're talking about, the questions of which I have not seen. So, but I'm just wondering, as a practical matter, would that be acceptable? Or, because it's not really like, we're not asking that something go out to postcards to everybody in the city or what, I mean, it's a pretty simple, or there could be like a little stand at the entrance of the library with a QR code saying, would you like to give feedback about the library? And they could do their QR code. And so are you saying that, would those be possible, or you're just, or not?
I think that question was directed at me, I think.
Yeah,
that
Sean,
was,
sorry.
Would the city or library help promote a survey that the subcommittee would create? I don't see any reason why not. To help promote it,
Okay.
but, you know, we're not, we don't want to have two separate surveys in the field at the same time. And also, I think it would be good to see the questions and.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm a little confused because the whole time we've had this ad hoc subcommittee, we've talked about the survey as a separate tool. I don't think it's good survey practice to have one homogeneous survey. This topic needs to be addressed separately. So I'm not sure how it evolved into this group survey or this homogeneous.
Well, so let's just kind of talk about the timeline. So, it is known that the city is gonna be doing the survey in the spring. So we're gonna go ahead and do that. If there's a separate survey, that sounds like this subcommittee is working on that and is very interested in that. So let's go ahead and see those questions and talk about what is the right, the timing to put a survey like that out into the field. If there's not interest in having some questions along with the main big survey that we're doing, that's perfectly fine. It sounds like there's a desire for it to be a totally separate thing that the subcommittee kind of puts together, which is fine, but I think, seeing the questions, looking at how those things might interplay would be very helpful.
Right, I just want to address in the minutes from last year, this was all outlined and scheduled. So there is a line item about a library survey for March. So it shouldn't be it's not any surprise. So we're not gonna follow the original timeline that was.
We are putting out a survey in March and April, but I think what we're hearing now is that the subcommittee wants to do kind of a separate, its own survey. And
Okay,
so
maybe I was confusing you.
yeah,
No, the subcommittee put out a schedule of our tasks, and we had specified that we would have a separate survey out in March.
and I would say that the city staff's not standing in the way of the subcommittee.
Okay, so we can go ahead with that. So what's the issue? I don't understand. So we can have a separate survey.
Please do,
Okay, fine. No, that's good.
but city staff resources being used toward it is a whole other question.
Okay, so you're saying we might have to do it independently.
I think that was the assumption based on what you're describing.
This is a survey for the library alone.
Right.
We're the library commission. And the work plan is to kind of elicit feedback, public community responses and feedback for the library and library programs. So we're doing our work plan with this. library community services encompasses the entire umbrella of all of that, and that survey is going to encompass all of that in the spring.
Totally
It's
understand.
completely
Totally
separate.
agree. Totally agree.
So
I think the question I have
Uh-huh.
is, what does that survey entail? Does it need to be separate from the larger survey, absent seeing the questions? Or understanding, was it trying to find out? It's hard to like assess that question.
Right, but isn't this the city? So I'm not sure who needs to assess that finding.
Well, it would be good
The
to
commission.
have.
Yeah, the commission, and we said, well, next meeting, we would have that for the commission to review. Okay,
Sure, and the tentative.
So our
date-
next, yeah, our
That
next
one.
meeting is on March 17th, which leaves half the month left to send out a survey after the commission looks at the questions, reviews them, discusses them, finalizes exactly how it's gonna.
now can we, is it proper to send that out as an email to the commissioners before through you, Carol, or if we wanted to, make sure there's time to review it?
I need advice on the Brown Act from
Yeah.
Nick and
not
Sean
if
on
it's
that.
gonna come- Not if it's gonna come before the commission and a decision is gonna be made about it. So it can't be circulated before, if you can get it to me by the Thursday prior to the meeting, I can make sure it goes out in the packet.
Okay.
And that way they will have, the commission will have
Yeah.
a weekend to look at it, but not before that. Since
And I
it's gonna-
also think, yeah, and I think it's important that we all sit in the same room and discuss it after we've had a chance to read it in advance in our packet. And then we can finalize all the details of how it's going to get distributed once everybody can see in front of them what is entailed.
Right, yeah, and I think
Right.
having it in the packet gives people at least time to read it before the meeting, so they can.
Yeah,
prepare.
yeah. And Michael, you want to?
Yeah,
Commissioner
I
Hare?
think the question of two surveys in the field is an issue that I think we've been grappling with since November, December, when we sort of first discussed the timing of this. We were trying, I think even back in those November, December discussions to separate it from the recreation community program survey. So I think that is but now that we have the definite timeline for the recreation community programs, part of our discussion in March, when we've had the first draft of the library specific survey, maybe to talk about timing again, because I think the ad hoc committee originally thought, oh, we'll do the focus groups first, and then from some of the questions and things that come out of there, that will help to inform some of the questions of the survey. But then we went back in January and really rushed with this survey in order to beat the recreation community program survey. And now here we are really with two surveys in the field, which I think we all want to avoid. So I just want to throw out there for our March discussion that we may well be also talking about timing. If the ad hoc committee in the coming weeks can get together with some of the focus group aspects, maybe it is more appropriate to do a late May survey or something. And so I think that would be part of the discussion as well. Sure.
Yeah, that could be.
So I have some ideas to throw out. I sense like a feeling of that there's conflict or confusion, but I don't hear any conflict or confusion. I just hear, or at least from my own understanding, who has been discussing what with whom, and what's the how do we categorize the subcommittee survey with what the city is doing. I also just want to appreciate that it's not just a matter of city resources or having two surveys in the field at the same time. There is always a big issue in any survey that you send out if people are going to feel the urge to respond and participate in that survey. So we could have the greatest survey with all the ideal questions sent out, but if it's not conveyed or, presented or, encouraging the community to, respond, we're not gonna get, as good a response as we might like. I understand the desire to be separate from the community survey. And I'm not trying to debate that, but there might be kind of like to test the waters. If knowing that we're gonna get a significant response from maybe more of the community, from the grand survey, that maybe we test the waters in that survey with some of our questions, and see what kind of responses or where people are leaning, or if, if they're headed in a certain direction. Just if we have a big audience that is gonna be responding anyway, to kind of throw in a few sort of test questions, or, oh, maybe we could go this way, or maybe we could go this way in our own survey. Maybe we use the other, survey as a test bed, for some of the directions that the, library survey, could go in.
And I might suggest that would be a good conversation to have during the March meeting, because it sounds people have at that point both the draft of the ad hoc committee's questions and also, if I was remembering that date right, the draft for the broader survey as well. And so we will have more information to go off of there.
I concur that I think those are both great thoughts, because that's, as Brian mentioned, that this whole idea of the Library of the Future survey is really as an exploratory survey, in the sense that if the Library of the Future sort of investigation goes on next year, we could be looking at a more major, survey thing. So I think that I completely agree with what both of them said.
Okay, sounds like we'll have more information, so we can have a more in-depth discussion at the March meeting about this. Does anybody have any other comments or questions before we move off of this topic? Great. All right, let's move to item D2, Library and Community Services Department statistics and recent activities. Nick, do we have any public comment on this item?
If anyone would like to make a comment on this item D2, please raise your hand. Seeing none, back to you, Chair.
All right, and I would say, I think we've all read the memo with the statistics, but there are a number of bullet points. Were there any that you wanted to particularly highlight before we open it for commissioner discussion?
Matter of fact, there are. I'll share my screen. We have a brief, very brief presentation here. Can you see that, Carol?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Okay. Yes. Oh. Doing it again, Sean.
I'm not advancing the slide.
My computer just doesn't, and it's my computer, I think, is giving it the ghost there.
Well, we can do the presentation without slides.
Hey, I can look at the slides and read them to you. How's that? We're doing old school. So. Your model.
So I'll go ahead and do it then. Just as a reminder, the slides are really just a mnemonic and a reminder for the information in the report, because it ranges over a couple of different updates. One is that with the statistics this year, each month we look at last month's statistics. So last month's statistics would be January of 2025. We've implemented a few enhancements to the reports. including, adding information about, specifically the library and community services weekly email newsletter, the number of emails to go out, the number of opens and so forth. So that's some new information we look forward to reporting each month. We've also added, information about the senior center themed lunch events, and, most significantly, in December, staff identified and corrected that there was some circulation statistics that were being duplicated. And so that led to an overcount of about 5,000 to 7,000 items per month, or about a 10% overcount. So in the current packet, that data has been retroactively corrected, going back into 2023. I think this packet has a couple of years. So that information is there. We were talking about this a little before the meeting, so I'll reiterate it now that the meeting's actually started, which is that the city has been seeking applicants for a vacancy on the library commission. There were a number of applications received by the deadline, which was February 14th. City council is set to consider those applications and make appointments tentatively tomorrow night. So that agenda packet is out there, those applications are out there, they're in the city council packet for tomorrow night. Moving on, there were, sorry. That's wrong. Next up, the city council is having its annual priority setting workshop, and they are requesting residents' input, survey, which is out in the field. Requested input from Menlo Park residents by March 7th. It's really the kickoff to the budget process each year. They set their priorities for the city to really focus on. Last year, the top 4 priorities were climate action, emergency and disaster preparedness, housing, and safe routes to schools. So part of the survey is asking folks if these still valid, others, and then the city council is planning to have their workshop on priority setting on March 22nd. So again, the input is requested by March 7th, and then the actual session will be Saturday, March 22nd. Let's see, the Belhaven Community Campus won a Green Building Award from Sustainable San Mateo County, an honorable mention, and from the American Institute of Architects San Mateo County chapter. That's because of all of its green features, being all electric, being net zero energy, having EV charging. So that's one of, we hope, many honors to come for this amazing new facility. And then there were a few events reported on. There was a very successful community college career fair, teen college and career fair at Belhaven Community Campus on January 25th. And we're looking forward to doing that each year. It was a very successful event. We're currently in Black History Month. We have a number of events either have happened or are coming up related to that. And then at the library, there is a traveling exhibition telling stories of Mexican California, so California's history as previously as a part of Mexico. There's a number of events also associated with that exhibition. And I think those will be items that we have on the slides, which will refresh memory in case if the slides are on the screen, that will prompt any questions, but hopefully that overview of this information that's in the staff report.
And then I'll just add a couple of other items. Sean was saying, hopefully we'll win more awards. The Belhaven Community Campus won an award from the California Parks and Rec Society. It's going to be presented at their conference in March. And then there is a bookish trivia night this Friday night at the main library. So if you all want to gather, it's not considered a forum if you're on the teams together. As long as you're not discussing agenda items, I'm pretty sure that the questions will be literature related and not library commission agenda related. And that's usually emceed by Supervisor Rose Waldman, who's kind of presented here. It's a lot of fun. You have to be on your game because we often get a few teams from Stanford. So when the kids from Stanford come over and kick everybody's butts, I tell Rose to put in questions about sports and popular culture to throw them off. That's what happens.
Great, thank you so much. Are there comments or questions from commission members on this topic?
How many people come to the trivia normally?
50-ish. It's after hours, so We will have some wine and cheese things as well. We make sure that it's adults only. Don't let the kids in.
Can I just ask a question about the newsletter engagement statistics? I'm just curious about the difference between newsletter clicks versus newsletter opens, namely just because those are such a wide gulf between those two numbers.
Yeah, so, a click is an extra form of engagement, so folks will open the email and that registers it. We don't really know how far they've read into it, but we do know if they click something. So that's where you see the big gulf, because I think most of the consumption is people just sort of reading the material that's
Okay,
there.
so that's the click-through rate is what's actually measuring how many people.
Yeah, did they click the link?
Got it, thank you.
And that's why the number could be larger than the open rate, because you could open it and there might be 10 items there and they might click on 5.
Yeah, generally it's much lower though, because the open, as soon as they open it up, it counts, not as many clicks, and in a way, the newsletter is pretty descriptive, so it's not really necessary to click through to get the headline.
And I would add because I do some of this consulting as for a living, that a lot of people sort of choose the way they consume different information from different organizations. Like some people might say, I get too many emails, so I'm not gonna subscribe to the newsletter because I see it on Facebook or I see it on Instagram or something. So if I see something on, say, Facebook, I can just like click through and join that particular event. So because like my inbox is always feels so overloaded, I pick my battles. Okay, for this organization, I'm just gonna like them on Facebook and I'll see everything that they're up to. Library, I subscribe to both because I'm extra interested in exactly what's going on. But, I might not subscribe to the Parks and Recs newsletter or another one of 20 newsletters that come out from the city, plus each city council member has their own sort of update. So I wouldn't read too much into who's subscribing and not subscribing and clicking through and not clicking through, because there's so many choices and options for people to get their information about what's going on around town. So just throwing that out there.
Appreciate the additional context.
All right, any other comments before we move to the library commission?
Commissioner Herrick has, sorry, Carol, Commissioner Herrick has his hand here.
Yeah,
Oh,
I have a
okay.
question. This could have been asked before, but is there a way to know when library cards are retired in a sense? I guess I asked this simply because some 42% or so of the community is non-owners, and I just wonder, this statistic that 7% of the Menlo Park residents have library cards, I'm wondering, is there any way to tell when somebody leaves? And
Yeah, I mean, we will, some people come in and say, I'm leaving the area, here's my library card, like they physically turn it over, but more often people just stop using it. And so the policy of the Peninsula Library System, I believe it's 7 years of non-usage and then they're cleaned out of the system. Yeah, so you have to be not using it for a pretty good chunk of time before you get cleared out. I will double check that though and come back next month with that exact data, but that's my recollection was that it was 7 years.
okay, so the total Menlo Park resident library card holders, that's reflecting.
That's
People
reflecting
cycling out.
right,
And you have the addition, but you don't have the subtraction.
right,
Got it.
Well, they do occasionally purge them out.
yeah, they purge them out.
Yeah, but I noticed each month doesn't add up quite.
Right.
It's just something's happening.
It's definitely a long-term kind of rolling.
It's rolling,
Sure.
yeah.
Yeah.
And also just like, from a personal experience, but in the opposite direction, I moved from San Carlos to Menlo Park and I went into the library and I said, I want a Menlo Park library card, damn it. And I'm gonna, cut up my, my San Carlos, library card because I'm, a proud Menlo Park, resident. A lot of people, keep both cards. It's like, oh, there's still services, from the county and, like I didn't fully cancel out on the San Carlos card as I thought that I did, because I reserved a book a few weeks ago and they said, your book has arrived in San Carlos. So there's a place in the system where you have to go and check your preferred library, et cetera, but I imagine that most people are not as adamant about, coming and going, and there's many services that you can use in both, being a member of both library systems, so I would imagine that a lot of people just don't bother, canceling one, when they get the other.
Right, and in San Mateo County, because of the unique sort of setup of Peninsula Library, it's not totally unique, it's pretty rare, and Peninsula Library system is, if you move to a different location, you really kind of retain the same library account. The changes is one's home library, so sometimes a vestige in the system will be like if your home library was in some other community and that wasn't updated, then the item might default to going to that other location rather than go over it now. But they typically, the system will detect if if a person is requesting a second card in the same system, and it'll catch that duplicate.
Yeah. The other thing I forgot to mention to Commissioner Herrick's question is the library cards expire every 2 years, so that you have to show. We just want to check because people move and change addresses and phone numbers and email addresses. And so we just ask people for an update every couple of years. So that's another check to see it will stop. It doesn't stop working. It just throws up a sort of an alert in the system. So if you were to move out of the area in 2 years, you would get a notice saying, hey, it's time to renew your library card. And that would be a check for us to see if you had moved or not, if you still wanted to use it.
Right, and then if someone that relocated entirely out of the area, it's probably not even on their radar, 2 years goes by, they're not coming in, so that checkpoint really doesn't happen. Because it checks when you try to check something out, so then it's the 7 years, of inactivity that is just purged.
And so I'm curious then, my kids, one of them is, avoids the library like the plague, which is, maybe a bigger challenge or, a different, issue, but like, I know, like my daughter hasn't taken a book out in a few years because she's off at college, and she's done an internship at college other years, but this summer she might be interning at a local nonprofit, so I'm sure she's gonna take out books from the library again. If she had a card through high school and then leaves to go to college and then, or hasn't used it for the card for a few years and then goes to the library this summer, will there be a red flag?
We would still have the information, it might be expired, and then we just need to like check the address again, I think it's, and we would renew
Or
it.
just like a driver's license or just?
Any like, proof of address, right?
Yep.
Any like a utility bill, or I think even a letter, but just
Anything
or
officially.
paper, or
Okay.
anything, close enough.
Thank you.
But yeah, 7 years of inactivity, then we just have to do an application.
All right, we ready to move on to D3?
I think so.
All right, Nick, do we have any public comment on the Library Commission tentative agenda calendar?
If you'd like to make a comment on item D3, the tentative agenda calendar, please raise your hand. Seeing none, back to you, Chair.
All right, I took some notes as we had our discussion, but before I make any comments, does anybody else have anything they want to say, Nick or commissioners on this tentative agenda calendar?
Question?
So I'll jump in. So I wrote,
Sorry, Carol, Commissioner Herrick had raised his hand. I was writing, so I wasn't.
But you can jump in if you'd like first.
go ahead, go ahead, Commissioner Herrick.
I already brought, the ad hoc committee hasn't discussed, we've been discussing focus groups for actually a couple of months in our meetings. We're really just coming around to potentially planning some. I would like to get some guidance, whether that activity should be agendized for discussion about which focus groups that we might go to and just in terms of the timing. And if so, we might need that as a special topic in March. So I think if there's commissioner discussion or city staff discussion about that topic as opposed to the survey, that would probably be good for us to know as we meet as an ad hoc committee.
Yeah, could I chime in there? I apologize because I think our intent was to have the ad hoc subcommittee update be a running item every month. Except because it's the joint
Yeah.
meeting and the typo, it didn't end up on this calendar, but if it would fall under that ad hoc subcommittee
So
update.
whatever it is.
Yeah, well, you
that-
put whatever level of detail you want there, but that's enough to capture whatever the subcommittee brings out.
But I think that's my specific question for us as an ad hoc subcommittee. Should we bring that in March? Are there commissioners or is that activity like these library visits that kind of go forward and we get as much input and discussions as possible in sort of an informal way? But I would love to hear commissioners or you, Carol, chime in about that, because I think we as the ad hoc subcommittee could move forward with like, say, one focus group by mid-March or end of March, unless the commission or the staff feels that that really needs to be discussed, you know, selection of different types of community or groups we're focusing on and how we reach out to them and solicit them. It's sort of a question, should we bring that as a formal thing in March and during our report?
Well, so can I just comment on, I'll come back to that in a second, but I was
Yeah.
looking at the list of everything that we have in March. And
Yeah.
there's going to be a presentation on library outreach, a policy update on makerspace, a work plan progress report, and review the draft survey for the community and recreation programs. The ad hoc subcommittee, and for sure, we're going to talk about the ad hoc subcommittee survey questions and possibly the focus groups. So maybe a longer ad hoc subcommittee discussion. And then I wrote down, I don't know if it's March or some other month, but there was a request for explanation of our budget and how to read that and maybe a walkthrough. So that's a lot. Any other comments on
If I
that?
could, that's why the city council items often get kicked from month to month, because you sort of take a look at everything that's on the agenda and prioritize what you really want to tackle that month, what you have time to tackle that month. And then maybe some things like the budget explanation might slide, that approving the makerspace policy has slid a couple of different times over the last few months. So
Yeah.
you know, that could be a discussion that we have, Chair, when we're in the agenda planning section. It's like, what do we need to?
Okay, so we can talk about that, and Commissioner Herrick has been attending those planning meetings as well. But to respond to your earlier question, I think in other meetings you have mentioned that the Friends of the Library and the Library Foundation were two focus groups that you were planning on doing. And so if you're able to so we all know that, if you're able to schedule those before our March meeting, it seems to me, I'm just speaking for myself, that you could go ahead with those. But if there are other I would like to know who else you're planning on having a focus group with and what you're going to be talking about with them. I think everybody on the commission should know that, just as a matter of information. So if that could be outlined in the March meeting, that would be good, I think.
Okay, thanks for that feedback, Carol, and I would ask Nick and Sean whether, just looking at April versus March, and just what I brought up at the beginning about Scott and I will be sort of trying to bring back a discussion and sort of definitions of things that are gonna dovetail with the library outreach presentation. Would it be possible in terms of the staff who lined up for that presentation to consider that for April? I guess I would throw that out as something that and the makerspace user policy potentially could go to April, and we can take care of survey, you know, all this other stuff in March and not have a jam-packed meeting.
Yeah, I do know that the makerspace user policy is not like super time sensitive. We wanna get it done, you know, relatively soon. It doesn't have to be March, so that's slip. I think on the presentation, I know the staff has been preparing. And so I think we would need to check with Rose and her team, you know, do they really need to go on March 17th? Can they go to April? I know they didn't have a presentation in April, so I'm not sure if there was a conflict. We can find out.
Okay.
And I know there was this other item, I don't know if that came up in the discussion up to this point, but the commission work plan 2024-25 progress report. I'm not sure how lengthy that would be. I can envision something like that being fairly brief, even just like a written informational item. So, you know, by maybe moving the makerspace user policy, if the progress report is super short, you know, that's two items right there that are, you know, not on March. They're not gonna be impactful time-wise.
Yeah, and if we check back with Rose and her team, they may be perfectly happy to move their presentation to April, so give them a little more time to work on it. And I think they'd probably be okay with that. The reason there wasn't one in April, Sean, is I think they were going for like an every other month cadence, but
Yeah.
So
Okay.
I have a question. I think it's kind of straddling both the comment Nick just made about city council and their agenda shifting around. And Carol, your comment. So do you like, I assume that like with city council, it's like, I'm gonna have to push out this one agenda item because we see bigger challenges and bigger community feedback with this one issue than some other things, and we have a feeling that the public comment's gonna go well into the evening, so let's shorten the agenda and put the other item on the next city council meeting. So if I'm just assuming or just guessing, let's say the ad hoc committee is working through its issues and says it gets to a point where, oh, we really need to bring this point back to the bigger committee and just like have a bigger discussion on this specific topic. I'm not saying that there should be, or could be, or should be, but I'm saying if you're in your subcommittee discussions, it turns out that you want to get the larger committee insights. Is it possible just to change the agenda sort of on the fly when you like meet with Nick ahead of the next meeting?
I think the short answer is yes. If the subcommittee sort of reports up to Carol or to staff and says, hey, we really need to have this on the agenda because it's really important for us to get it at this point, then yeah, I mean, that's, for me, that's not changing it on the fly. That's kind of like, we have our planning calendar, but maybe the staff isn't ready with the policy, you know, things happen. So that's why we call the planning calendar tentative agenda calendar, because things do move around.
And priorities change, so,
Right.
okay.
things come up, I will note that, it's really good to have this kind of conversation, because that's what the tentative agenda is for. Kind of look ahead and plan, but just the last month's meeting did have 6 items that are bulleted here, not including the standard stuff like minutes and whatnot. And I recall that being, adjourned by 8:30, if I'm not mistaken, so it may well be to fit everything that, without moving too many things around, especially if the discussion, just moves along, which has been the case. And there hasn't been extensive public comment on anything, which can take some time, so it may be that we can all work out and not really have to bump a lot of items.
Great. We'll do that. So the only other comment that I had, and we may talk about this in commission reports, but for the April meeting, I think that would be the meeting where we would have the election of the new chair and vice chair, correct? Since we have a joint meeting in May with public Parks and Rec, and then the new chair would take over at the June meeting.
That's correct. Yeah, I mean, that's the normal cadence of doing it, but we have kind of set up a procedure for the selection of chair and vice chair, so I think last meeting or 2 meetings ago, we had talked, there was some talk between Chair Orton and Commissioner Herrick about when we were selecting Commissioner Herrick for vice chair, about when would be the best time to have that changeover. And so things have changed there. We could bring that back next month and have that as probably a really quick discussion and clear that up too, if you want to do that. But yeah, it's normally April or May in advance of the June meeting.
Okay.
But it doesn't have.
Is it,
If
is
you
it-
want to, if you want to file it into next month, you could file it into next month.
okay. Does anybody else have any comments they want to make about the agenda, calendar, the tentative? Okay. I think we can now move to commissioner reports. Would any commissioner like to make a short report out on items of interest to the entire commission? And I can't see hands, but so Nick, I'll have to rely on
See
you.
any hands in the room right now, Chair, but we'll give it a second and see if anybody, maybe they're just too tired to hold up their hand.
Chicago.
Yeah. Okay, there was no reporting out for the Library Foundation. There was no mid-month meeting. So I plan to attend the next one. We can report out then. And we already heard in part of the ad hoc subcommittee of our library visits. We have had a couple people from the Library Foundation attend a few of the tours. All right, anybody else? All right, well, it looks like we're ready to adjourn then at 7:53. So the meeting is now adjourned. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being patient with my Zoom attendance. Appreciate it.
You, everyone.
Thank you, Chair.
Carol.
Okay, bye-bye.